Welcome. It's really nice to have you back right here at the stage of the World Conservation Forum, and thanks for joining us online. As I promised before, there will be a moderated panel discussion in our next Nations Hour when we have the honor to welcome Angola and Pakistan. So it is my pleasure to introduce you the Secretary of State for the Environment of Angola, Paula Cristina Domingos Francisco Coelho, the Joint Secretary of Pakistan, Muhammad Suleyman Khan, and the moderator will be the Director of the Center for Political Analysis of the Századvég Foundation, Zoltán Kiszelly. Enjoy the program.
I also want to welcome all of the audience here present in the hall and on the international audience in the internet web. We are going to have the Nations Hour and in between this Nations Hour, I have the privilege to introduce you Ms. Paula Cristina Domingos Francisco Coelho, Secretary of State for the Environment from Angola. Yeah. And Mr. Mohammed Suleyman Khan, Joint Secretary, National Project Director, Ministry of Climate Change from Pakistan. Before we start the discussion, we have the privilege to have a welcome address from the Minister of Climate Change from Pakistan. I ask you to watch this short presentation.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Pakistan is a country which is very rich in its natural habitats. We've got 12 ecological zones in Pakistan, and so the biodiversity of wildlife in Pakistan is also very rich. But unfortunately, because of human pressures and because of the population pressures, we are fast losing our wildlife. For the conservation of these species and for wildlife, we believe that the triangle of conservation of nature, the habitats, the involvement of the community, and sustainable hunting. All three of these play a very key role in ensuring in the future that our wildlife can be sustained. We have already tested this formula in the northern areas of Pakistan, where our markhors, which had gone extinct, have now come back. And they have come back because the communities are involved, and the trophy hunting program that we have over there is of global significance. It has recreated the habitats and the protection of the habitats by the communities for wildlife protection, because the wildlife over there has got a value that the community can feel and can earn from, and that is why they protect them, and the numbers have gone up. I think this is the formula that needs to be used for wildlife protection in Pakistan, and we are expanding our protected areas in Pakistan. In the last 1 year, we have expanded our protected areas by 50%. We have added 15 new national parks onto the 30 existing national parks that we already had. And around these national parks in the buffer zones, we want to have this triple formula of nature conservation, community involvement, and linked with sustainable hunting, so that the proceeds can go to the communities who can then protect the nature and the wildlife. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the address of His Excellency. The way of the presentation is this: I put question and we discuss from our respective continents, respective countries. First, I want to put the question: what role does hunting play in the culture of your countries?
Hello, thank you. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. First of all, allow me to thank the Hungarian government for arranging such a mega and wonderful event for hunters and outdoor lovers from across the world. And I was very pleased to hear the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister of Hungary yesterday when he referred to existence of hunting, which is directly relevant to the culture of a country. I think as a sport and as a sector, hunting is not sustainable if it doesn't have roots in one's culture. Pakistan as a country has deep-rooted roots in its culture, its history, its religion, and we have a population of 220 million people. And it's a hunting-loving nation. So once we look back, I mean, we have very strong ties and similarity of hunting culture with Hungary and other European countries. And that's why there was a keen interest from the Pakistani side to come and participate in this event.
Thank you. What is the situation in Angola?
Thank you as well. Allow me to greet on behalf of the Angola government and also to say that we are a very diversified country where culture as such doesn't play a role for hunting situation. We are still recovering, numbering two species. We didn't have a very nice feedback, so it's very well known worldwide. But the census of the species leaving us as yet for preservation and conservation, and this is how we are going to do. So apart from culture, of course, we are also part of the kingdoms for the Congo, but it also with the leverage of knowledge, we do only for food production, but not wildlife. At the moment, it's banned, and we keep working with the traditional healers and dealers in the country for also to have a custodian legislation in country for the protection of the species.
Thank you. My second question is, do you agree that sustainable game management is essential part of nature conservation? What are the experiences in your countries?
I think it's relevant in any country's context, because hunting is a part of, game management is part of nature. Hunting is essential for the preservation of nature, as we have witnessed. And without sustainable game management, the triangle that my minister was just referring to is simply not possible if hunting is carried out without any game management process, following any game management process. So I think it is extremely essential. We lack in this area in Pakistan, and I think we look forward for learning from this, game management practices which are currently being practiced in Hungary. And yes, without game management, I think we're not doing any justice to the preservation cause of nature.
Thank you. Please.
Yeah. What do we understand as sustainable? Maybe it's quietly different for a country or really is based on conservation and preservation. We do believe that ecosystems, they need to be well managed, and also to look at soil and to avoid defragmentation, and also to create a better habitat. And when we also talk about game management, is where we're still doing census and recovering populations into number per species, and then we shall see what will be the role for conservation according to the whole full services that are going to be provided by the nature itself. We also would like to acknowledge that from our, let's say, legislation point of view, there's still a lot to going on for the sustainability. What is it that we are going to be guided on? And this is where we push onto agriculture services, livestock, livelihood, and this is where we apply sustainability as such, not for the hunting industry, since we continue to conserve and preserve species.
I would to ask you to go into some details and give us some examples of the cornerstones of your country's nature conservation efforts. Maybe you can give us one or two short examples on that. Thank you.
The main focus, let's say if you talk of the present government's initiatives towards ecosystem restoration, I think this is unprecedented program that has been launched by our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Imran Khan, who's a conservationist at heart. And his ecosystem restoration program of 10 billion tree tsunami focuses on physical interventions throughout Pakistan. And one cornerstone is that enhancement of protected areas. As my minister was mentioning, we've added 15 new national parks, because unless and until we keep a certain percentage of our total territory under protective cover, we cannot really think of talking or doing anything practical on the ground vis-a-vis nature protection. So this ecosystem restoration program is basically based on nature-based solutions. So we we believe, and it is a time-tested thing, that nature heals itself, provided you let nature nurture. So this entire program, once we say, is the cheapest. Once we talk of nature-based solutions, there are hardly any external or physical interventions as such which are not sustainable. So we have set a target of 3.5 billion trees to be grown in the next 2 years. We have already planted 1 billion, and we hope to complete this target by 2023. So, and most of this target is based on self-generation program, which we called ANR, stands for Assisted Natural Regeneration. And 60% of this component, the 1 billion tree target achieved, was validated by a third party, a consortium which comprises of WWF, IUCN, and FAO. And they have revalidated our claims that keeping, just securing the landscape, we've been able to, regenerate 1 billion plants in Pakistan, and 60% of which is ANR, or Assisted Natural Regeneration. Also, we have witnessed that by declaring protected areas, which also includes sanctuaries and public and private game reserves, the number of extinct species or the endangered species have really bounced back. And now we have witnessed in Pakistan, again through third-party validation, that number of those extinct or endangered species have come back, and now they are no longer in the danger zone. So I think seeing is believing. The results are there. This ecosystem restoration program was launched by Government of Pakistan in the COP held in Madrid. And the World Bank has come forward, and it has also, announced $180 million US after going through the program and the credentials and the results that it's shown on the ground. So I think it is globally acknowledged now that Pakistan's this 10 billion tree tsunami program is one of the global-led green initiatives of any government.
For us, talking about cornerstones, we will start with the institution for the first time, the legal system that entails the National Conservation Institute that is being gazetted, and now we have a coverage on percentage of almost 20%. And Angola is part of mostly of the all protocols and conventions that pertains to environment and biodiversity, climate change, and deforestation. We also do work inland with the local agencies from the United Nations, like the FAO, the IUCN, the CITES, the IUCN, and many others, not to mention or any type of publicity, but I would like to acknowledge them all for the empowerment that they do give on our legislation and also programs. We also do a little bit of commitments, because actually national parks, they are given by the government to be managed to the Ministry of Culture, Tourism and Environment, but they are public-owned initiative which goes under gazetted by the National Assembly or the Parliament. So nothing is done if there is no law that is approved. It is not bounded by the law. And also other responsibilities is that we are mega diverse, maybe the second large country in Africa continent. So different types of biomes are there. We also have conservation areas under forestry sector. We have the deserts. We also have, let's say, steppes, and also, let's say, water-based limitation or boundaries to conservation. So it's mega diverse, not only for wildlife as such, I mean those you can observe, but also the eptofauna and the fishery sector as well. So we look to establish and go on the ground and create a unity to combat and tackle illegal trade. This is also very good supportive and for the management of those. So we use those as tools. We share. We have steering committees where we do analyze cross-cutting documents and how will be the way forward for us to discuss as well. So I think for maybe the efforts is more legally binded instruments, and then those are the driving instruments for the management as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Thinking about the human responsibility of us, of mankind, what are the major challenges in your respective countries in the coexistence of humans and wildlife?
Human responsibility, I think the foremost issue is the conflict with nature. Nature-based, natural resources are for human consumption. But at the same time, it is the responsibility of human race to use them sustainably, not to harvest them beyond a certain level, which is then, gets beyond repair. So I think where the responsibility of humans is to use them sustainably, I think the leaders, the global leaders, and the political leadership in every country has this responsibility to, first of all, make alternative resources available for people, so that they may not be, use unsustainably all these resources. So I think it's a very delicate balance. So it's easier said than done that they need to be utilized on a sustainable basis, but the challenges are huge. We need to cater for the human requirements also, and for that I think it's a much bigger challenge. And once that challenge is met with, only then you can create a balance between human and nature.
And what are these challenges in your country?
Okay. So we do apply the damage law. I don't know if it's the correct translation for English or Hungary, but we have a damage. Of course, human responsibility is on top of the table. This is why here I introduced the unity to combat illegal wildlife. But it's not only for fauna and flora, but it's also for environmental crimes that we may describe by law. And the responsibility is to apply the fines. We have changed our penal code also to increase the fines and the way we have to put or to judge them. So we did capacity building for prosecutors and judges so that they are aware of the harm that they do for the future generations to come. And also, there's also public services that they need to do and restore and help. So a voluntary system is also into place, and this is where we also tackle responsibilities for human in our country. Of course, then it will deal with the other issues like who does what in terms of civil society, universities, nurseries, and we do believe that a very strong program that we already have for environmental education and awareness plays a role to play on the human responsibilities as well.
Being also precise or going into the detail, I want to ask you, what are government measures for sustainability implementing right now, recent projects? Maybe if you can give us some examples that also we from other continents, from other countries can learn from. Thank you.
One of the best example in our country for sustainability is the trophy hunting program, where we have made the local communities stakeholder in the entire process. Because we believe, and it is again an internationally time-tested formula, that unless you create economic value in natural resources and also make the local communities a stakeholder in their management, you really can't make it a sustainable solution. So once you, and I think we have tested this formula for the last, let's say, 30 years. It has really produced good results. And now in our all future endeavors and projects that are in pipeline, we are trying to make the communities a real stakeholder in the mainstream projects. So they gain out of it, and only then, once they attach their economic benefits from that project, that's the only way for a populous country, at least, like Pakistan, But in the longer run, I was earlier talking to my colleague from Angola, and it is the community model. You need to make them part of the programs, the project implementation. Once they derive material and economic benefits, only then I think we can talk of sustainable solutions.
I will maybe first recall that we are a preservation and a conservation type of country. And for challenges, we do push the rangers as the first line and the front line to do the work. And we also would like to acknowledge that a ban at the moment for hunting is the Bible of the country, if I may use that word. And what we also do is that we need to continue the census on number of species and also to talk on what we are going to talk about or what we are doing here. And being from African continent, I can just say that, of course, communities play a huge role on the way we do things, on where we decide. They are heard, they are part of civil society, and they have always a word to say. So on my introduction, I was also including the traditional leaders that they play a role. So, and again, what is it that we mean by sustainability? So it will depend, it will apply differently. So here, in giving me an open bracket, I will just say that here we are learning a lot, and then to see how can we apply, because the numbers for any hunting model, it will pass again for discussions, strong ones. We do not believe that is the momentum, even though this conference shows that there is a possibility for that. But in the African continent, in our region, in Angola, we are still preserving. Sustainable means conservation, preserving, and this is what is the basis for now for our understanding. Thank you.
The next question goes into the coexistence of hunting, wildlife, and agriculture. In most of the countries, wildlife and agriculture, wildlife and hunting belongs to the Department of Agriculture. And you mentioned that your country and also Angola is going to have more national parks. How can you manage it to have a population needed food, and you should also preserve the wildlife and hunting? How can you manage to coexistence them, to manage this?
I think it is more of administrative setup that I think varies from country to country. Over here, even in Hungary, the wildlife management is with the Ministry of Agriculture, whereas in Pakistan it is with the Ministry of Climate Change at the federal level, and at the provincial level we do have departments of forests, wildlife, and fisheries. But I think in the real essence is that to make wildlife management a part of a rural economy. So once we talk of creating economic value in the wildlife resources and then making them a part of the community's household incomes, we are actually talking about the same objectives as are envisaged in any agriculture policy. So I think, yes, it is, I think, would be very efficient that if you dovetail it with agriculture. But, in most of the cases, wildlife exists where the lands are marginal, where there's hardly any agricultural output. Only those lands are dedicated for, habitats and the wildlife. So in Pakistan, it is a challenge, as I earlier mentioned, that because we are a very populated country, and once it gets down to the human sustenance level, so it's more important to feed your population. It's more, priority index, it is higher than mere, protecting your natural resources. But now, with an increased focus on the enhancement of protected areas in Pakistan, we are increasing our total territory from 13% to 15% in next 2 years. And I think we're also launching a national park service in Pakistan. And with the enhanced capacity of our wildlife departments, I think there will be a more focus on, the better management of wildlife as it was ever done before in Pakistan.
Okay, through the NBSAPs, which are the National Actions Plans, and recall now the CBD Convention, the Convention for Biological Diversity, we also look at the way to do agro-industry projects. And we need to recall that national parks are under the sector of environment. This is where we do the safeguards, this is where we do training, this is where we bring to dialogue, this is where we discuss things to see on the way forward. Of course, agriculture, it also deals with the food production, food security, and whenever there is a cross-cupping or overlap on activities, is regulated by a law that is being gazetted that regulates forestry sector pertaining to wildlife. Because like we can take an example of bees. They do not only live into the wildlife, let's say, conservation areas. There are also other patches of forests that we do have in the country that those are under agriculture. As long as it's not inside or is not a conservation area, or depends on each category, if it's a reserve, if it's a national park or any other according to the IUCN categories, then that will be environment. Well, now, when we look at issues for the agriculture again, whenever project that you need to study, we need to do your environmental study assessments. That also will dictate the type of mitigation process you have to go, adaptation program you have to implement, community-based and nature-based solutions. Slowly, but we are progressing on that direction so that we will see food security. We need also to bear in mind, when it comes for countries' agriculture policy, we also need to see that we are a developing country. We still depend a lot on imports, and that is also a challenge for us. So this is how we need to understand what comes first, prioritize, and of course then institutions must talk to give priority for the communities.
Thank you. Coming to the end, I want to ask the question, what role is hunting playing in your tourism industry?
We believe that hunting, sustainable hunting is part of, very important part of ecotourism. There is an enhanced focus on promoting ecotourism in Pakistan. Our Honorable Prime Minister has, laid emphasis on this multiple times. We have dovetailed this, certain interventions in various policies because Pakistan has 12 ecological zones. We have deserts, we have sea, and we have highest mountains in the north. And there's a lot of potential in ecotourism. And hunting, as I earlier said, the trophy hunting program whereby foreigners do come even in the worst of worst political instability. People have been coming to Pakistan and they've been spending money, which has contributed towards wildlife conservation and also livelihood of local communities. So Pakistan has immense beauty to show, provided it is done properly and we are able to project, which we are trying to. And I think there are innumerable opportunities in Pakistan where, besides hunting, there are many other, opportunities which can lead towards, a very sustainable ecotourism, potential in Pakistan to be undiscovered by people, to be discovered by people.
How do I say in English is not important in a way that you do understand at the moment is not a priority? That will be my answer, maybe not back to you, but just to make an aware in a way that we are not doing hunting. It's banned at the moment. We are recovering, but what we can maybe offer instead of for tourism development is to contact our foreign desk for investments through our embassies worldwide that we are open for investors to come on ecotourism services. There is also facilities that are also going for private management, partnerships, and co-management in country. This is our way, the way we see the development of tourism sector. And of course, you can also do photographing. You can also do other kinds of activities in the country.
I know we all experienced the COVID pandemics, and I want to ask you, what are the measures we have to take after the COVID pandemics? Because at one time we will overcome it, and what are your conclusions? What do you think you have to change in hunting, wildlife management, or sustainability to make it on a long term also sustainable and working?
I think it's a very important question in the present context. World has to move on. I mean, this COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world altogether. All the, SOPs that were in place, and the kind of life that we were all used to has changed for everyone. But luckily, hunting or any nature-based activity or any outdoor activity already has, because you see, you go back to nature, so nature heals you. So all the SOPs that we follow are basically, I think it's a reminder to everyone to go back to nature and go back to natural, lifestyle and nature-based solutions. So once you are in a hunting field, so maintaining a distance of 6 feet is not an issue. You're already, walking, quite yards away from each other, or any, for that matter, any ecotourism-related activity. Having said that, we need to put in certain, SOPs in place, which I think this was a great achievement by a Hungarian government, that we were all able to gather and come from our countries to here, despite, the COVID challenges, which are not yet over. But talking of hunting and talking of any outdoor activity, I think, for instance, in Pakistan, the only activity which was allowed during the peak COVID was the forestry sector. We were granted permission by the federal government to, continue with our plantation activities. So when we were witnessing the worst ever lockdowns in our country, with piles and piles and number of restrictions coming in every day, the only sector which was allowed to work was forestry and the national parks. So I think the only solution for the world in the post-COVID scenario is to go back to nature and be gentle with nature. I think things will be better.
So, well, maybe I'll just take from there, because it's a cross-cutting issue where COVID is, we need all to review and invent new type of economy or management of ecosystem services, patches, and of course, it does go back to nature. But let me just keep you aligned that the COVID as such, we had to close our national parks because we are a transboundary country, and we need to remember that pangolins were accused of being the transporter of the disease for humans, the virus to humans. So we have to go under research and also to throw a campaign for awareness, what is this that we are dealing. So it's an invisible virus, of course, and they say they are through air, through soil, to wherever you are, even though you can use masks, but you can do so. Laboratory is playing a huge role, and I think that we also need to bring doctors with us in conservation to discuss things with the veterinarian people. We also need to bring them down and see what will be the impact for futures to come with other diseases that we already have into the wildlife. What will be the bacteria? What will be, are they strong enough to deal with us or not? So through that, I would like to call on the conflicts that this may raise for our economies, but also that we should all develop a recovery action plans based on soil and based on waste, on management. When I say management, we can look at the basis of the environment, which is air, water affairs. So I think that we all drink water, we all walk on top of the soil, and I think that can be the basis for us to face as a bloc, as one nation together. I think we will overcome and achieve better goals for COVID impacts.
We talked a lot about concrete measures in your countries. We talked a lot about how you perceive the situation. I ask you to take a look into the future. If you think in 50 years' time, what do you think for your country, for your regions, will be the major challenges, and how are you preparing for them above of those we talked about already? What are these challenges, and how can you face them? How can you overcome them?
Well, that's a very difficult question, because even at present, Pakistan is amongst the top 10 most vulnerable countries, towards climate changes. Though, as a contributor, we are probably at 135th number, but on the receiving end, on the vulnerability side, we are in the top 10. And having said that, that's why we are coming up with very ambitious ecosystem restoration programs based on mitigation, adaptation projects. However, if you ask me, in the next 50 years, I hope and pray that those are not there. But if you look at the IC mode report, and if there is a change of, they say that in the next 100 years, but rather by the end of this century, if there is 1 degree change in global temperatures, if the temperature rises by 1 degree, half of the present world which exists today would be underwater. So this is a very dreadful situation. In the context of Pakistan, I think if you just simply relate with our domestic issues, deforestation, dwindling wildlife, plastics, smog, air pollution, these are some of very critical issues that we are trying to cope with at present. And if they are not sorted out in the near future, I think not only for Pakistan, but for every country, it's going to be a very dreadful situation. Because when we talk of climate change, it's not just a boundary or a country or a nation. We need to have a transboundary perspective. We need to have an international perspective. We're talking of human race, and not as one nation. So this is a global phenomena, global challenge that all of us as a human race need to fight it together, because no nation can fight it alone. And not even a single country can be expected to come forward and fix this thing. The entire world has to step up their efforts towards fighting the global climate challenges, which are huge, and which are really, scary at times when you think of that scenario, what would happen to us after 50 years or maybe after 100 years. So let's hope we are able to fix our Mother Nature and try to heal it, the wrongs that we have done to it. Thank you.
I think we need to be more robust. We need all to accept climate change facing the same way, same direction. We need all to agree that we are all on each region in this country, in this world, are facing the impact of climate change. And according to the developing countries, and allow you, my colleague from the same panel, to push you on board on that, we need really to tackle and to be strong on our legislation so that we can preserve, we can continue, and then we'll see future for the future generation to come. We are just borrowing the way we are living today. And I would like to maybe to pledge that the good practices we should scale up those. Even though today some of activities are doable by law, but what we do expect, it might not cause good impact for this world. This is why we have the increase of the sea levels, temperature, transformation. And also when it comes to technology transfer, we should really, of course, this is another big green business. I'm really changing the terms of the word, the sentence, because if we don't also look at technology, and here, yet we spoke about the COVID impact, then we are not going to do anything. So that will be 50 years to come, not only for Angola, because we do depend on each other, otherwise we wouldn't have the World Conference here today. But we would like to pledge really to say that we need to speak one voice, one-on-one for nature, as we are learning here, but for the preservation and the conservation of species, and of course to tackle issues together with the conflict of the human race. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The motto of our exhibition, of our congress is One with Nature. I think we got very good examples and very concrete examples from your respective countries. I would thank our distinguished guests to come here and share their thoughts with us and to have this insight from your respective countries, which are also respective continents from Europe, seen from Europe. I want to thank our guests, Ms. Paula, Cristina, Domingos, Francisco Coelho, the Secretary of State for the Environment from Angola, and Mr. Mohamed Suleyman Khan, Joint Secretary, National Project Director, Ministry of Climate Change from Pakistan. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Please stay tuned. The next discussion will follow soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.